What if I told you that the reality you experience every day isn't something that just happens to you, but something you create, that every thought, belief, and perception you hold has the power to shape the world around you? We often think of reality as something fixed, something beyond our control. But the truth is, the way we see the world determines the world we live in. Two people can go through the exact same event, yet experience it in completely different ways. Why? Because our minds don't just detect reality, they construct it. And if that's the case, then what kind of reality are you creating for yourself? Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever questioned whether the world you see, hear, and feel is truly real? Or could it be that what we experience is merely a carefully constructed illusion, crafted not by the universe, but by our very own minds? Every moment of our lives, we assume we're perceiving reality as it is. We trust our eyes to show us the world, our ears to reveal sound, and our touch to confirm what is solid. But what if I told you that your brain is not a passive observer of reality? It is an active creator of it. Let's start with something simple. Take color, for example. The colors you see don't actually exist in the outside world. Light waves hit your eyes, but red, blue, and green are not inherent properties of the universe. Your brain takes in the raw data and paints the colors into existence based on how it has learned to interpret light. Without a brain, there are no colors, only wavelengths of energy. The way we experience the world is also shaped by culture and language. People from different cultures perceive things differently, not because reality itself is different, but because the way they have been taught to interpret it varies. Some languages have words for colors that others do not, and speakers of those languages actually perceive colors differently. The concept of personal space, the interpretation of facial expressions, and even the way people experience emotions are influenced by cultural conditioning. This means that reality is not the same for everyone. It is shaped by the structures of the mind that have been built through language, upbringing, and social experience. Dreams provide another clue that reality is a mental construct. When we dream, we experience vivid sights, sounds, and sensations that feel real, yet they are entirely generated by the mind. During a dream, we do not question the reality of what is happening, no matter how strange it may be. The same brain that creates the dream world is the one that constructs waking reality. The difference is that we have collectively agreed upon a set of rules for waking perception, while dreams operate without such constraints. But just because we have agreed on a version of reality does not mean it is objective. The implications of this understanding are profound. If reality is something the brain constructs rather than something it directly perceives, then changing the way we think can change the way we experience the world. Fear, stress, and anxiety are not objective facts, but mental states shaped by perception. If the mind can create a distorted reality in moments of fear, it can also reshape reality in moments of peace and clarity. By altering the way we interpret the world, we can change our experience of it. Illusions, biases, and cognitive filters all show that the mind is not a passive receiver of truth, but an active participant in shaping what we call reality. The external world may exist independently of us, but the version of it that we experience is entirely dependent on the way our brains process and interpret information. We do not merely see the world, we construct it. When we look at the world around us, we assume that colors exist as inherent properties of objects, and that sounds are objective features of the environment. A red apple, a blue sky, the green leaves of a tree, all seem to have fixed colors that exist independently of us. Similarly, we believe that sounds are just as they appear, whether it's the chirping of birds, the honking of a car, or the melody of a song. But what if these experiences are not absolute truths of the external world, but instead fabrications of the mind? Color does not exist in the physical world. Objects do not possess color as an intrinsic property. Instead, they reflect and absorb certain wavelengths of light. Light itself is simply electromagnetic radiation, and the spectrum visible to humans is only a small fraction of the vast range of wavelengths that exist. What we perceive as color is our brain's way of interpreting different wavelengths of light. The red of an apple is not a property of the apple itself, but rather a result of how our eyes and brain process the light that bounces off it. If our visual system were different, the apple might appear to be a completely different color, or even colorless. or even colorless. The perception of color varies not just between species, but even among individuals. Some animals, such as bees, can see ultraviolet light, which is invisible to humans. To a bee, a flower that appears plain white to us might have vibrant ultraviolet patterns that guide it to nectar. On the other hand, some animals, such as dogs, have fewer color receptors than humans and experience a world with a more limited range of hues. Even among people, those with color blindness perceive colors differently due to variations in the way their eyes detect light. This means that color is not an objective feature of reality, but a construct of perception, created by the brain in response to light signals. The fact that color is a perception rather than a reality is further demonstrated by the phenomenon of color illusions. The same color can appear different depending on the surrounding context. A gray square placed on a dark background may appear lighter than the same gray square placed on a light background. This is because the brain does not simply receive color information passively. It interprets it in relation to other visual cues. The brain adjusts its perception of color based on lighting conditions, contrast, and context, creating an experience of color that is not always aligned with the raw data received by the eyes. One of the most famous examples of color illusion is the dress that went viral on the internet, with some people seeing it as white and gold while others saw it as blue and black. This variation in perception occurred because the brain interprets colors based on assumptions about lighting. People who assumed the dress was in shadow perceived it differently than those who assumed it was in bright light. The controversy over the dress revealed a fundamental truth about color. It is not an inherent feature of objects, but a subjective experience constructed by the brain. Sound, like color, is also a perception rather than an absolute reality. In the physical world, there is no such thing as sound, only vibrations in the air. When an object moves or collides with another object, it creates pressure waves that travel through the air. These waves reach our ears, where they are converted into electrical signals and processed by the brain as sound. Without a perceiving brain, these vibrations would remain just that, vibrations. Sound, as we experience it, is a creation of the mind. A tree falling in the forest with no one around does not make a sound in the way we understand it. It creates vibrations, but without a brain to interpret those vibrations, there is no experience of sound. This is not just a philosophical question, but a scientific reality. The ear detects differences in air pressure, but the experience of hearing, the sensation of a melody, the perception of a voice, or the appreciation of a musical note, exists only within the mind. Just as different species perceive color differently, they also hear sound differently. Humans can detect frequencies between approximately 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz, but many animals have different ranges. Bats, for example, use echolocation to navigate in the dark, detecting ultrasonic frequencies far beyond human perception. Dogs can hear higher-pitched sounds than we can, which is why a dog whistle is inaudible to us, but clear to them. Whales and elephants, on the other hand, communicate using sounds at very low frequencies that can travel vast distances through water or the ground. These differences in perception highlight the fact that sound is not an absolute feature of the world, but is experienced differently depending on the biological system interpreting it. Our perception of sound is also shaped by context, expectation, and interpretation. The brain does not simply process sound passively. It actively fills in gaps and modifies what we hear based on what it expects. This is why we can understand speech in a noisy environment, even when parts of the sound wave are missing. Our brains reconstruct missing information to create a coherent auditory experience. One striking example of how the brain influences our perception of sound is the McGurk effect. In this phenomenon, the same sound can be perceived differently depending on visual input. If a video of a person saying "beye" is played while the audio says "gaye," many people will perceive a completely different sound, such as "dia." The brain integrates both visual and auditory information to create a perception that may not match the actual sound being produced. This demonstrates that sound is not a fixed reality, but an interpretation shaped by multiple sensory inputs. Musical perception also reveals the subjective nature of sound. Different cultures have developed distinct musical systems. And what sounds pleasant in one culture may sound strange or dissonant in another. The way we perceive harmony, rhythm, and melody is shaped by our upbringing and exposure to specific musical traditions. The same series of notes can evoke deep emotion in one person while being meaningless to another. Music is not an inherent property of sound waves. It is an experience constructed by the mind. The perception of pitch and tone is another example of how sound is subjective. People with perfect pitch can identify musical notes with precision, while others may struggle to distinguish between them. Additionally, certain auditory illusions, such as the shepherd tone, create the sensation of a continuously rising pitch, even though the sound is repeated. These illusions reveal that what we hear is not a direct reflection of reality, but a constructed experience shaped by the brain's interpretation. Even silence is not truly silent. When placed in a completely soundproof environment, people often begin to hear internal sounds, such as the movement of their own blood or the ringing of their ears. This suggests that sound is not something that exists only in the external world, but is also generated within the mind. Both color and sound serve as reminders that reality is not something we simply observe. It is something we actively construct. The colors we see and the sounds we hear are not fixed features of the universe, but the brain's way of making sense of raw sensory data. Our perception of them depends on biological, psychological, and cultural factors that shape how we interpret the world. Rather than being absolute truths, color and sound are deeply personal experiences, revealing that much of what we take for granted as reality is, in fact, a creation of the mind. We often think of time as an absolute, steady force flowing from past to future at a constant rate. Clocks tick, seconds pass, and the sun rises and sets in a predictable rhythm. We assume that time exists independently of us, moving forward at the same speed for everyone and everything. But this assumption is an illusion. Time is not fixed. It is experienced differently depending on perception, biology, and even physics. What we call time is not an objective reality, but a mental and physical construct shaped by the observer. Our perception of time fluctuates based on our experiences. When we are engaged in an exciting activity, time seems to fly by. A thrilling movie, a deep conversation, or a joyful moment with loved ones can make hours feel like minutes. Conversely, when we are bored or waiting for something, time drags. A few minutes in a long line or a dull meeting can feel endless. This distortion happens because time is not something we simply measure. It is something we experience, and our brains are responsible for shaping that experience. Time perception is deeply tied to attention. When we are highly focused on something, we process more details, making time seem to slow down. This is why moments of extreme fear or danger feel stretched. In a car accident, for example, people often recall everything in slow motion: the shattering of glass, the twisting of metal, and the moments leading up to impact. The brain, in a state of heightened awareness, processes more information per second, making the event seem to last longer than it actually does. In contrast, routine and repetitive experiences seem to pass quickly because the brain processes them with less detail, leading to the feeling that time is slipping away. Memory also plays a crucial role in time perception. When we look back on a week filled with new experiences, it feels longer than a week filled with routine activities. This is because our brains encode more memories during novel experiences, giving the illusion of a longer time frame. This phenomenon explains why childhood summers seemed endless, while adulthood passes in a blur. As children, we constantly encounter new experiences, creating more detailed memories. As adults with routines and familiar patterns dominating our lives, fewer unique memories are formed, making time feel compressed. Biological factors also influence time perception. Age plays a significant role in how we experience time. Many people report that time speeds up as they get older. One explanation is that as we age, each year becomes a smaller fraction of our total life experience. To a 5-year-old, a year is 20% of their life, making it feel vast and significant. To a 50-year-old, a year is only 2% of their life, making it seem much shorter in comparison. Additionally, metabolic changes affect how quickly we process information. Younger people tend to process information faster, making their perception of time more detailed, whereas older individuals may process fewer details, creating the sensation that time is passing more quickly. Time perception is also influenced by culture. Different cultures experience time in different ways. In Western societies, time is often seen as linear and something to be managed efficiently. Phrases like "a time is money" or "don't waste time" reflect a perspective in which time is a scarce resource. In contrast, some cultures view time as cyclical or fluid. In certain indigenous cultures, time is not measured in strict increments but is instead based on natural rhythms and events. People in these cultures may not feel the same urgency about schedules, and their perception of time may differ significantly from those who adhere to strict clocks and calendars. Sleep and dreams provide further evidence that time is not fixed. When we sleep, our perception of time becomes distorted. Dreams can feel like they last for hours, even if they occur in just a few minutes. During rapid eye movement, REM sleep, the brain generates complex experiences that seem to unfold in real time, even though their duration may be much shorter than it appears. People who experience lucid dreams often report being able to extend time within their dreams, performing activities that would take far longer in waking life. This suggests that time, at least as we experience it, is something our minds construct rather than something external and absolute. Beyond human perception, time itself is relative in the physical world. Einstein's theory of relativity showed that time is not a universal constant, it is influenced by speed and gravity. According to relativity, time slows down for objects moving at high speeds or experiencing strong gravitational fields. This has been confirmed through experiments with atomic clocks. Clocks placed on fast-moving airplanes tick slightly slower than those on the ground. Similarly, clocks positioned at different altitudes on Earth tick at different rates because gravity is stronger closer to the planet's surface. One of the most astonishing implications of relativity is time dilation. If a person were to travel at nearly the speed of light, time for them would slow down compared to someone remaining on Earth. A space traveler moving at near light speed might experience only a few years, while decades pass for those left behind. This means that time is not something that flows uniformly for all observers. It is dependent on speed and gravity. Even more mind-bending is the possibility that the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. In physics, the concept of space-time suggests that time is just another dimension, much like height, width, and depth. Some interpretations suggest that what we experience as now is just a slice of a larger reality where all moments already exist. This challenges the traditional view of time as something that moves forward in a straight line. Quantum physics adds another layer of complexity. Certain experiments suggest that particles can be entangled across time, influencing each other's states even when they are separated by a temporal gap. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics imply that time may not be fundamental at all, but rather an emergent property of deeper physical processes. Philosophers and scientists have long debated the nature of time. Some argue that time is an illusion, a mental construct that helps humans make sense of change. Others believe that time is a fundamental aspect of the universe. The difficulty in defining time arises because we experience it so intimately, yet it behaves in ways that defy intuition. The brain itself provides evidence that time is constructed rather than absolute. Different neural processes contribute to our experience of time, and damage to certain brain regions can alter time perception. People with neurological conditions such as Parkinson's disease or schizophrenia often report distortions in time, experiencing it as either speeding up or slowing down. These disorders demonstrate that time is something created by the brain rather than something externally fixed. If time were truly fixed, we would all experience it in the same way. But the reality is that time bends, stretches, and compresses depending on perception, memory, biology, culture, and even the laws of physics. Time is not something we pass through like a train on a track. It is something our minds and the universe shape in ways that are far more fluid and flexible than we tend to realize. We tend to think of ourselves as having a stable, unchanging identity, a core self that remains constant throughout our lives. We recall childhood memories, recognize our own faces in the mirror, and feel that the person making decisions today is the same person who made choices years ago. This sense of a unified self is one of the most fundamental aspects of human experience. Yet, when examined closely, it becomes clear that the self is not a fixed entity, but a constantly changing process, a mental construction created by the brain. The self, as we perceive it, is an illusion. The brain generates the experience of self through a combination of thoughts, memories, emotions, and sensory perceptions. These elements are constantly shifting, yet the mind weaves them into a coherent narrative, giving the impression of a continuous identity. However, there is no single unchanging I that exists apart from these experiences. Instead, the self is a fluid and dynamic creation, shaped by moment-to-moment neural activity and external influences. One of the clearest demonstrations of this illusion is memory. We believe that our memories define who we are, anchoring us to a stable identity over time. But memory is not a perfect record of the past. It is selective, malleable, and often unreliable. Studies show that memories change each time we recall them, influenced by new experiences, emotions, and even suggestions from others. People can misremember key details, insert false memories, or even entirely fabricate events they never actually lived through. If memory were the foundation of a stable self, then the shifting nature of memory would suggest that the self is just as unstable. The sense of self also depends on the brain's ability to integrate sensory input. We experience ourselves as an embodied being, but this perception is constructed by neural processes that can be disrupted. People who suffer from brain injuries, strokes, or neurological disorders sometimes experience a loss of self-awareness or a detachment from their own bodies. In conditions like depersonalization disorder, individuals report feeling as though they are watching themselves from outside their own bodies, as if they were merely observers rather than active participants in their lives. If the self were a fundamental, unchangeable aspect of existence, it would not be so easily altered or disrupted by changes in brain function. Experiments with meditation and psychedelic substances also challenge the idea of a fixed self. Many people who engage in deep meditation report a dissolution of their sense of self, feeling as though they are merging with the world around them. Similarly, psychedelics like psilocybin or LSD can temporarily erase the boundaries of the self, leading individuals to experience a profound loss of ego. These experiences suggest that the self is not a fundamental reality, but a mental construct that can be temporarily suspended or dissolved under certain conditions. Neuroscience provides further evidence that the self is an illusion. There is no single location in the brain responsible for the sense of self. Instead, it arises from the interaction of multiple neural networks. Different brain regions contribute to various aspects of self-perception, including memory, emotions, body awareness, and decision-making. When these networks are disrupted by brain damage or neurological conditions, the sense of self can fragment or change dramatically. For example, people with dissociative identity disorder, DID, can exhibit multiple distinct identities, each with its own memories, preferences, and personality traits. This condition demonstrates that even within a single brain, the self is not a singular, continuous entity, but something that can be split and reorganized. Beyond neuroscience, the illusion of self can be explored through the lens of philosophy. Many Eastern philosophical traditions, including Buddhism, have long argued that the self is an illusion. According to Buddhist teachings, the belief in a permanent self is a source of suffering because it leads to attachment and resistance to change. Instead of viewing the self as a fixed identity, Buddhism suggests that we are a collection of ever-changing experiences, thoughts, and sensations, what is referred to as the 5 aggregates. Modern cognitive science aligns with this perspective, showing that what we perceive as a stable self is actually a constantly shifting collection of mental and physical processes. Western philosophy has also questioned the nature of selfhood. The philosopher David Hume argued that when he looked inward, he could never find a single unchanging self, only a bundle of perceptions that were constantly in flux. He likened the self to a theater, where different thoughts, emotions, and sensations appear and disappear, but there is no single self behind them. Similarly, existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre suggested that the self is not something we are born with, but something we construct through our choices and actions. Psychology reinforces the idea that the self is malleable. Someone who was shy as a child may become outgoing as an adult. A person who once held strong beliefs may later reject them entirely. Personalities shift, habits evolve, and even fundamental values can change. If the self were truly fixed, such transformations would not be possible. Instead, what we call the self is a narrative we create to maintain a sense of continuity, even though we are constantly evolving. The illusion of self also extends to free will. Many people believe they are the conscious authors of their actions, making choices based on their independent will. However, neuroscience suggests that decisions are made in the brain before we become aware of them. Studies using brain imaging have shown that activity in certain brain regions predicts a person's decision seconds before they consciously choose it. This suggests that the feeling of making a choice is a post hoc illusion. Our brains decide, and our conscious minds take credit for the decision afterward. The social construction of identity further highlights the illusory nature of selfhood. Our sense of who we are is shaped by culture, upbringing, and relationships. The self we present in one context may differ from the self we present in another. A person might act differently with family than with colleagues, and differently still with close friends. This adaptability shows that there is no single, unchanging self, only a fluid collection of roles and behaviors that shift depending on circumstances. Even language reinforces the illusion of self. We speak as if there is a stable I that exists independently of experience, but in reality, I is just a convenient label for an ever-changing collection of thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. This illusion is useful. It allows us to navigate the world, form relationships, and function in society. However, recognizing that the self is not fixed but a mental construction can free us from many of the constraints that come with identifying too strongly with a rigid sense of self. Understanding that the self is an illusion has profound implication. It can change how we relate to others, how we deal with suffering, and how we approach life's challenges. If we recognize that the self is not fixed, we can become more open to change, more accepting of others, and less attached to rigid identities. This realization does not mean that we do not exist, but rather that our existence is more fluid and interconnected than we typically assume. The self is not something we possess. It is something we continuously create and recreate in response to experience. The brain does not simply receive sensory input. It processes, interprets, and sometimes even fills in missing information. Our eyes detect light, but the experience of sight is created by the brain. Our ears pick up sound waves, but the experience of hearing is shaped by expectations and context. Even touch is not a direct experience of the external world, but a constructed sensation based on how the brain processes nerve signals. One of the most striking examples of how perception shapes experience is the phenomenon of optical illusions. When we see an image that appears to move, change color, or defy logic, it is not because our eyes are faulty, but because our brains interpret sensory information in ways that do not always match reality. The famous checker shadow illusion, where two squares of identical color appear different due to surrounding context, demonstrates that perception is not a simple reflection of what exists, but an active interpretation shaped by contrast, lighting, and assumptions. Our perception of time is also shaped by experience. When we are engaged in something exciting, time seems to move quickly. When we are bored or waiting, time slows down. This is because the brain does not measure time like a clock, but interprets it based on the number of experiences processed. The more detailed our perception of a moment, the longer it seems to last. This is why childhood summers felt endless. Each day was filled with new experiences, making time feel stretched. In adulthood, when routines dominate, time feels compressed because fewer new memories are being created. Memory itself is shaped by perception. We assume that memories are accurate representations of the past, but they are reconstructions influenced by emotions, beliefs, and even external suggestions. When two people recall the same event differently, it is not because one is lying. It is because their perceptions shape the experience in unique ways. Studies have shown that memories can be altered simply by the way questions are asked. If someone is asked, how fast was the car going when it smashed into the other vehicle, they will recall a higher speed than if asked, how fast was the car going when it bumped into the other vehicle? The difference in wording changes the perception of the event, altering memory. Emotions play a significant role in shaping perception. When we are in a good mood, we tend to interpret events more positively. A minor inconvenience might be brushed off as unimportant. However, when we are feeling stressed or anxious, the same event can feel overwhelming. This is why two people in the same situation can react completely differently. One may see it as an opportunity, while another perceives it as a threat. The emotional state of the observer influences the way they experience reality. Cognitive biases further shape perception. The brain takes shortcuts to make sense of the world, but these shortcuts can lead to distorted interpretations. The confirmation bias, for example, causes people to seek out and remember information that supports their existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. This means that people with different perspectives can interpret the same set of facts in completely different ways. A political debate, for example, can be watched by two individuals who come away with entirely opposing views on who won, simply because their perceptions are filtered through their pre-existing beliefs. Social influences also shape perception. Culture, upbringing, and societal norms affect how we see the world. In some cultures, direct eye contact is seen as a sign of confidence, while in others, it is considered rude or confrontational. The same action can be perceived as respectful or disrespectful, depending on cultural background. This demonstrates that perception is not just an individual experience, but a shared learned process influenced by external factors. Language plays a crucial role in shaping perception. The words we use affect how we categorize and interpret experiences. Some languages have multiple words for different types of snow, while others have only one. This affects how speakers of those languages perceive and think about snow. In some languages, the concept of time is structured differently, with time being understood as something that moves vertically rather than horizontally. These linguistic differences shape the way people perceive time, direction, and even causality. The influence of perception extends to the way we experience physical sensations. Pain, for example, is not just a response to injury, but a perception shaped by the brain. That people who are distracted or engaged in something enjoyable feel less pain than those who are focused on their discomfort. This is why athletes can continue playing despite injuries, and why soldiers in battle sometimes do not notice wounds until after the fight is over. The brain filters sensory information, amplifying or dampening pain depending on context and attention. Expectations also shape perception. When people taste the same wine from two different bottles, one labeled as expensive and the other as cheap, they often report that the expensive wine tastes better. Even when both are identical, this is because expectations influence sensory experience. The same applies to food, music, and even medical treatments. Placebo effects occur because the expectation of relief changes the perception of symptoms. If someone believes a sugar pill is a powerful medication, their brain can generate real physiological changes that mimic the effects of the actual drug. Perception is also shaped by personal identity. People tend to see the world in ways that align with their self-image. If someone identifies as strong and independent, they will perceive challenges as opportunities for growth. If they see themselves as a victim of circumstances, they may perceive the same challenges as unfair obstacles. This self-perception influences not only thoughts but also actions and experiences. Dreams provide further evidence that perception constructs reality. In a dream, the world appears just as vivid and real as waking life, yet it is entirely created by the mind. People can see, hear, and feel within dreams, even though there is no external input. The ability of the brain to generate entire worlds during sleep suggests that waking perception is also a constructed experience rather than a direct window into reality. Perception shapes relationships. When we meet someone for the first time, our initial impressions are influenced by subconscious biases, body language, and even the context of the encounter. A person met in a relaxed setting may be perceived as warm and friendly, while the same person met in a stressful environment may be perceived as distant or unfriendly. Our expectations and prior experiences color how we interpret their words and actions. Understanding that perception shapes experience has profound implications. It means that by changing how we perceive situations, we can change how we experience them. If we view challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles, our entire approach to life shifts. If we become aware of cognitive biases, we can make more rational decisions. If we recognize that emotions influence perception, we can become less reactive and more intentional in our responses. Perception is not a passive process of receiving reality, but an active process of creating it. Every moment, the brain constructs an experience based on sensory input, memory, emotions, and expectations. What we see, hear, and feel is not the world as it is, but the world as we perceive it. Recognizing this opens the door to greater awareness, flexibility, and understanding, not just of the world, but of ourselves. Our beliefs play a fundamental role in shaping reality. When we believe something to be true, our brains filter information to reinforce that belief. This is known as confirmation bias, where we seek out evidence that supports our existing views while ignoring contradictory information. If someone believes they are unlucky, they will notice every misfortune while overlooking moments of good fortune. If someone believes they are capable and strong, they will interpret challenges as opportunities for growth rather than setbacks. In this way, beliefs act as a lens through which we experience the world, shaping our interactions and expectations. Thoughts have a profound impact on perception. Two people can experience the same event but interpret it in completely different ways based on their internal narratives. A delayed flight can be seen as a frustrating inconvenience or an unexpected opportunity to rest and reflect. A job loss can be perceived as a devastating failure or a chance to pursue a new path. The external situation remains the same, but the way it is framed in the mind determines the emotional experience attached to it. By consciously choosing empowering interpretations, we can reshape our experience of reality. Emotions also shape reality. When we feel happy and optimistic, the world seems brighter, people seem friendlier, and challenges feel more manageable. When we feel anxious or depressed, the same world can appear hostile and overwhelming. This happens because emotions influence attention and memory. Positive emotions broaden our awareness, allowing us to see more possibilities, while negative emotions narrow our focus, making problems seem larger than they are. By managing emotions through practices like mindfulness, gratitude, and self-awareness, we can shift our perspective and experience the world in a more constructive way. Visualization is a powerful tool for shaping reality. When we vividly imagine a desired outcome, the brain responds as if it were already happening. Athletes use this technique to enhance performance by mentally rehearsing their movements before competitions. Studies have shown that people who visualize themselves succeeding are more likely to take actions that lead to success. This is because the brain does not always distinguish between real and imagined experience. By repeatedly focusing on a positive vision, we program the subconscious mind to align our actions with that vision, making it more likely to manifest in reality. Attention determines what we experience. The brain is constantly bombarded with sensory information, but it can only focus on a limited amount at any given moment. What we choose to focus on shapes our reality. If we focus on problems, we will see more problems. If we focus on possibilities, we will see more opportunities. This is why two people can walk through the same city and have completely different experiences, one noticing beauty and kindness, the other noticing chaos and hostility. By directing our attention toward the things that uplift and inspire us, we can create a reality that feels more fulfilling and meaningful. Words and language shape reality as well. The way we describe our experiences affects how we feel about them. When we use negative language to describe a situation, we reinforce a negative perception. Saying, "This is unbearable," intensifies distress, while saying, "This is challenging, but I can handle it," shifts the experience toward resilience. The words we use internally and externally act as mental programming, reinforcing certain emotions and mindsets. By choosing language that empowers rather than limits us, we can shift our perception of reality in profound ways. The subconscious mind plays a major role in shaping reality. And so, many of our thoughts and behaviors are driven by unconscious programming developed over time through experiences, cultural conditioning, and repeated patterns. If someone has been told from a young age that they are not good enough, this belief can become deeply ingrained, influencing their actions and self-perception in adulthood. However, the subconscious mind can be reprogrammed through repetition, affirmations, and intentional shifts in thinking. By replacing limiting beliefs with empowering ones, we can reshape the way we experience life. Perspective determines how we experience difficulties. When faced with adversity, some people break while others grow stronger. The difference is in how they interpret challenges. A setback can be seen as proof of failure or as a stepping stone to success. A painful experience can be seen as meaningless suffering or as an opportunity for deeper understanding. By choosing a perspective that fosters resilience and learning, we can transform obstacles into opportunities for growth. Our environment also plays a role in shaping reality, but we have the power to influence it. The people we surround ourselves with, the media we consume, and the spaces we inhabit all affect our mindset and emotions. Negative influences can drain energy and reinforce limiting beliefs, while positive influences can uplift and expand possibilities. By consciously curating an environment that supports growth, creativity, and well-being, we can shape a reality that aligns with our aspirations. Gratitude is one of the most effective ways to reshape perception and experience. When we focus on what we appreciate, we train the brain to notice abundance rather than lack. This shift in focus changes not only emotions but also actions. People who feel grateful are more likely to take positive steps toward their goals because they see life as full of possibilities rather than limitation. Practicing gratitude daily, even for small things, gradually rewires the brain to perceive reality through a lens of abundance rather than scarcity. Identity is fluid and self-created. The way we define ourselves influences the way we experience life. If someone sees themselves as a victim, they will interpret events through that identity, reinforcing feelings of helplessness. If someone sees themselves as capable and resourceful, they will approach challenges with confidence. By consciously choosing an identity that aligns with personal growth and empowerment, we can shape the way we move through the world. Identity is not fixed. It is something we create and recreate with every thought, decision, and act. The mind and body are deeply connected, and physical state influences perception of reality. Exercise, nutrition, and sleep all affect mental clarity, mood, and resilience. When the body is healthy and energized, the mind is more optimistic and focused. When the body is neglected, the mind is more prone to negativity and stress. Taking care of physical health is a fundamental way to shape reality because it directly impacts how we think, feel, and respond to life's challenges. Acts of kindness and service also have the power to reshape reality. When we contribute positively to others, we shift our focus away from personal problems and toward a greater sense of connection and purpose. Helping others creates a feedback loop of positivity, reinforcing a reality in which kindness and generosity exist in abundance. This not only benefits those we help, but also transforms our own experience of the world, making it feel richer and more meaningful. Every moment presents a choice in how to interpret and respond to life. Reality is not fixed. It is constantly shaped by perception, belief, attention, and action. By understanding this, we gain the power to actively create a life that aligns with our highest aspirations. The way we think, the words we use, the emotions we cultivate, and the perspectives we choose all contribute to the reality we experience. By becoming intentional about these choices, we can transform not only our personal reality, but also the world around us.